June 5th, 2020, 5 a.m. A man calls 911, bleeding and panicked. 2 intruders broke into my house. They shot my wife. They shot my dog. I fought them off, but they got away. Police arrive at the quiet South Carolina suburb, but something's wrong. Every door is locked. From the inside, every window sealed, no footprints, no forced entry, no way out. The husband claims he chased armed killers through his own house, but the evidence tells a different story. One that begins with Google searches for homicidal strangulation and ends with a life sentence. This is the locked room murder, and the killer's worst enemy wasn't the police, it was his own. Browser history. Before we start, quick warning, this case involves the death of a family pet. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button because we dive deep into the forensics, the psychology, and the detective work that solves these cases. Today's story has it all: a staged crime scene, digital evidence, and a husband who thought he'd planned the perfect murder. Spoiler alert, there's no such thing. Let me introduce you to the 3 lives that ended that morning in Hanahan, South Carolina. A. Peaceful suburb just north of Charleston, where violent crime almost never happens. Caitlin Conrad Speck was born on August 18, 1986. By 2020, at just 33 years old, she had built a comfortable life in the Eagle Landing neighborhood. Caitlin worked from home as a lawyer, designer, spending her days in the house she loved. In the weeks before her death, she had been actively planning a major home renovation, selecting materials, sketching designs, stacking building supplies in the garage. This wasn't someone planning to leave. This was someone investing in her future. Her constant companion was Bailey May, a golden Labrador that Caitlin considered family. Bailey May had her favorite spot at the foot of Caitlin's bed, neighbors would later tell investigators that Bailey May was protective and vocal, the kind of dog who barked at strangers. Then there was Matthew Garrett Speck, 37 years old in 2020. Matthew had been with Caitlin for over a decade since meeting in 2008. From the outside, their relationship appeared stable. They owned property together, shared a home in a nice neighborhood, and didn't air problems in public. But beneath that surface, something had changed. In the final years of their marriage, Caitlin confided to close friends that Matthew had become emotionally distant, spending more time away from home. A former co-worker of Matthew's would later testify that he complained not about Caitlin as a person, but about what a divorce would cost him. He was obsessed with the house, repeatedly emphasizing that Caitlin would never agree to sell their Eagle Landing home. Matthew had also found someone else. His girlfriend would later testify in court, revealing text messages where Matthew plainly stated his intention to divorce Caitlin and start over. The stage was set for tragedy, but Matthew Speck wasn't planning a messy divorce. He was planning something permanent, and he was doing his research. Here's where this case gets truly chilling. In the weeks and months before June 5th, 2020, Matthew Speck's internet search history told a dark story. Prosecutors would later present evidence showing Matthew had researched homicidal, strangulation, choking death, and cyanide poisoning. These weren't casual searches. These were deep dives, hours spent on specialized forums reading about toxicology and lethal doses. But his research didn't stop at murder methods. He also searched for techniques on how to stage crime scenes and make a murder look like something else, investigators found screenshots on his phone showing maps of the neighborhood with potential exit routes. The timestamps were particularly damning. Matthew conducted this research late at night while Caitlin was in the next room, completely unaware that her husband was planning her death. Think about that. While she planned renovations to make their home more beautiful, Matthew was planning how to kill her and keep that very same house for himself. After all that research, Matthew settled on a plan: shoot Caitlin while she slept, stage a home invasion, shoot himself to create superficial wounds, and play the traumatized surviving victim. It might have worked, except Matthew Speck wasn't as smart as he thought. June 5th, 2020. The sun hasn't yet risen over Eagle Landing. It's approximately 5 a.m. The neighborhood is completely silent. No cars on the street, no lights in windows, just the kind of deep pre-dawn quiet that makes suburban neighborhoods feel almost unnaturally peaceful. Inside the two-story home, Caitlin Conrad Speck is sleeping peacefully. At the foot of her bed, Bailey May the Labrador is resting. The house is quiet. The doors are locked. The windows secure. Everything appears normal from the outside. And then the silence is shattered by gunfire. According to the forensic reconstruction investigators later pieced together, Caitlin never had a chance to react. She was shot while she slept. There were no defensive wounds, no signs she struggled or tried to escape. The medical examiner would later determine that death was instantaneous. She never knew what was happening. Then, in what prosecutors would describe as a calculated and necessary act to maintain his illusion, Matthew turned the gun on Bailey May, the dog who had lived with him for years, who greeted him at the door every day, who trusted him completely, showed no signs of aggression. Bailey May was shot where she lay, killed instantly. Here's crucial evidence that would later unravel Matthew's entire story. Neighbors later confirmed Bailey May was the kind of dog who barked at strangers. She was vocal and protective. Some neighbors even complained about her barking when delivery drivers approached the house. But on the morning of June 5th, not a single neighbor reported hearing Bailey May bark before the gunshots. The first sound anyone heard was the gunfire itself. Why? Because the person who entered that bedroom wasn't a stranger. It was someone Bailey May recognized and trusted, someone she had no reason to fear until the very last second of her life. After the killings, Matthew moved through the house methodically, setting the scene he'd researched online. But despite trying to create the illusion of a robbery, he was remarkably selective. Expensive electronics remained untouched. A laptop sat on the kitchen counter. Jewelry wasn't taken. Caitlin's wallet sat on a side table in the foyer with cash and credit cards. Inside, no drawers were ransacked, no closet searched, no signs of anyone frantically looking for valuables. Why? Because Matthew Speck intended to keep this house. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every improvement Caitlin had invested in, he wanted it all. He wasn't about to damage his own property just to sell a story to police. Then came the final part of his carefully rehearsed plan, creating wounds on himself that would support his home invasion narrative. Matthew went into the bathroom and, using a knife from his own kitchen, a knife that would later be tested and found to contain his DNA, he inflicted shallow cuts on his forearms and abdomen. Forensic experts who later examined these wounds noted they had smooth edges and were incredibly superficial, positioned in areas easily reachable by Matthew himself. The blood pattern on his clothing suggested he'd been standing still, likely in front of a mirror when these cuts were made. These were textbook self-inflicted wounds, the kind made by someone, carefully controlling the depth to avoid hitting anything vital. Only after staging the scene, creating his wounds, and waiting for enough time to pass that the blood on Caitlin and Bailey May had already begun to dry, did Matthew Speck finally pick up his phone and dial 911. At approximately 5 a.m., emergency dispatch receives Matthew's call. His voice is shaky, his breathing heavy. He claims 2 armed intruders broke into his home, attacked him and his wife while they slept, and that he's been injured. Patrol units arrive while it's still dark. Officers secure the perimeter and approach the house carefully. But almost immediately, something doesn't add up. The front door is locked. Not just closed, but locked with a deadbolt and internal latch. Every window is intact, with frames tightly sealed and screens showing no tears. There are no obvious signs of forced entry anywhere. Officers make entry and begin clearing the house. The first floor appears completely normal. Everything is in its place. No signs of a struggle or frantic search for valuables. On the second floor, they find the horror Matthew created. Caitlin Speck is lying on the bed, unresponsive. At the foot of the bed is Bailey May. Both have been shot. Matthew greets officers with blood on his clothes and fresh cuts on his forearms and stomach. He launches into his story. 2 men burst in. There was a struggle. They shot his wife and dog, wounded him, then fled just before the sirens. But the officers are already skeptical. They're trained to read crime scenes, and this one is, telling a very different story. As detectives begin their investigation, the inconsistencies pile up rapidly. First, the entry and exit problem. If 2 intruders broke in, how? Every access point is locked. No forced entry, no broken windows. And most damning, if Matthew chased them as he claimed, how did they exit through a door that officers found locked from the inside, physically? Impossible unless they were never there. Forensic teams document everything. On floors and hallways, no footprints, no dirt, no evidence of multiple people or any physical altercation. Inside the bedroom, ballistics evidence tells its own story. Bullet angles show someone standing over the bed, shooting at targets who weren't moving. Shell casings are exactly where you'd expect if someone calmly walked in and fired at sleeping victims. And there's the complete absence of anything stolen. Wallet untouched, electronics in place. Jewelry remains. The only room showing disturbance is where the murders occurred. When Matthew is taken to the hospital, forensic specialists examine his wounds and reach unanimous conclusions. Self-inflicted. Edges too smooth. Placement too convenient. Depth too controlled. More importantly, there's no gunpowder residue on Matthew's clothing where there should be if he'd struggled with someone firing a gun at close range. No defensive wounds on his hands. The medical team treats his wounds with only basic care, nothing advanced. For someone who claimed to have fought off 2 armed attackers, Matthew walked away remarkably unscathed. Meanwhile, the tech team seizes Matthew's phone and computer. They have no idea yet just how damning this evidence will be. When cyber forensics experts extract data from Matthew's devices, they uncover evidence that becomes the backbone of the prosecution's case. His browser history is a roadmap of premeditation, searches for homicidal strangulation, choking death, and cyanide poisoning, all time-stamped and undeniable. He'd visited pages about staging crime scenes and making murders look like something else. Screenshots on his phone show detailed neighborhood maps with annotations highlighting potential exit routes. These aren't casual searches. These are screenshots someone saved and studied. But perhaps most damning are the text messages with his girlfriend. Matthew doesn't speak of Caitlin with affection or even neutral detachment. He speaks of his marriage as an obstacle to be solved. He talks about divorce plans, but also expresses frustration at what that would cost him. The girlfriend provides crucial testimony, telling investigators Matthew had promised they would move away together to start a new life after he divorced his wife. The timeline of these promises overlaps perfectly with his disturbing internet searches. A former co-worker adds another piece. She testifies Matthew had asked her, in seemingly casual conversation, what typically happens to shared real estate when a spouse unexpectedly passes away. He'd emphasized repeatedly that Caitlin would never agree to sell the Eagle, landing home. Suddenly, the motive becomes crystal clear. Matthew wanted out of his marriage, but didn't want to pay the price of divorce. He wanted to keep the house, start fresh with his girlfriend, and decided that murdering Caitlin was a better solution than legal separation. The timestamps show a pattern of planning that stretched back months. This wasn't passion. This wasn't spontaneous. This was calculated, methodical, and cold. Hours after being discharged from the hospital, Matthew finds himself in an interrogation room at Hanahan Police Department. The room is small, stark, with just a table and a few chairs. A camera in the corner records everything. What follows is a 5-hour interview that seals his fate. Detectives employ logic traps, presenting facts that directly contradict his story and watching him try to explain the impossible. They've done this countless times before. They know the tells. They know when someone is lying. And Matthew Speck is giving them every single tell. When Matthew repeats his claim about chasing the intruders to the door, a detective leans forward and asks calmly, "Matthew, if you chased them, how did responding officers find the door locked from the inside with both a deadbolt and a latch engaged? Can you explain that too?" "Me?" Matthew's eyes dart around the room. He shifts in his seat. First, he suggests he might have locked it himself in a state of shock after they left. The detective doesn't miss a beat. "So you're saying that after 2 armed men just murdered your wife and shot your dog while you were wounded and bleeding, your first instinct was to walk to the front door and carefully engage both locks? Does that sound reasonable to you, Matthew?" The room goes quiet. Matthew has no answer. He tries a different approach, claiming maybe he's misremembering the sequence of events because of the trauma. At one point, he even refers to the attackers as phantoms, as if they were ghosts who could materialize and dematerialize through solid walls and locked doors. The detectives let him talk. They let him dig himself deeper. Every new detail contradicts the last. Every explanation raises more questions than it answers. Then the detectives shift tactics. They present the forensic analysis of his wounds, laying out photographs on the table. They explain in clinical detail how the cuts are too shallow, too neat, too perfectly placed to be from a violent struggle with armed attackers. These wounds, one detective explains, pointing at the photos, were made by someone standing still, probably in front of a mirror, carefully controlling the depth of each cut they're in. Areas you can easily reach yourself. There's no tearing, no defensive pattern. And Matthew, there's something else. The detective pulls out another report. "There's no gunpowder residue on your clothing. None. If you wrestled with someone who fired a gun, you'd have residue on you, but you don't. How do you explain that?" Matthew has no good answers. He becomes quieter, more evasive. His story keeps changing, contradicting itself. And then comes the knockout blow. The detectives slide a thick folder across the table. Inside are printouts of his internet search history. They read them aloud, one by one, slowly, deliberately. Homicidal strangulation, choking death, cyanide poisoning, how to stage a crime scene, lethal, doses, exit routes. "Matthew," one detective says, looking him directly in the eyes, "your own computer tells us you researched exactly how to do what was done in your house this morning. The dates match. The times match. This is your search history. How do you explain that?" The room falls into uneasy silence. Matthew Speck stops talking. He stares at the table. His shoulders slump. It's not a formal confession, but it's an unspoken admission. Everyone in that room knows the truth. Matthew Garrett Speck is placed under arrest and charged with murder, possession of a weapon during commission of a violent crime, and ill treatment of animals. In November 2024, more than 4 years after the murders, Matthew's case goes to trial in Berkeley County Court. The trial lasts 5 days. The prosecution, led by Assistant Solicitor F. Alexander Myers and Nicholas Young, approaches the case with surgical precision. They present fact after fact, building an overwhelming case. Medical experts testify about Matthew's wounds, explaining why these injuries are consistent with self-infliction and inconsistent with defensive wounds from an actual attack. Ballistics experts walk the jury through bedroom evidence, showing the angles of shots, positioning of shell casings, and the undeniable conclusion that the shooter was standing calmly over sleeping or stationary targets. Crime scene technicians describe the locked doors, intact windows, and absence of any physical evidence that anyone other than Matthew, Caitlin, and Bailey May were in that house when shots were fired. Then comes testimony that puts a human face on Matthew's motive. His girlfriend describes his promises to divorce Caitlin and start a new life together, recounting conversations where Matthew made it clear his marriage was just a formality he intended to end soon. The coworker testifies about Matthew's concerns over the house, his repeated emphasis that Caitlin would never sell, his questions about what happens to property when a spouse unexpectedly dies. But most powerful is the presentation of Matthew's internet search history. Prosecutors show screenshot after screenshot, search term after search term, homicidal strangulation, choking, death, cyanide poisoning, how to stage a crime scene, the timestamps, the duration, the level of detail. The defense attempts to create doubt by pointing out nearby security cameras didn't capture clear footage. They suggest poor camera quality means there could have been intruders not caught on video. But this only strengthens the prosecution's case. If intruders had come and gone, they would have had to enter and exit through locked doors without leaving a single trace. Not just unlikely, impossible. After 5 days of testimony, the jury doesn't need long to deliberate. When they return, the verdict is unanimous on all counts. Guilty of murder, guilty of ill treatment of an animal, guilty of possession of a weapon during commission of a violent crime. On November 22nd, 2024, Matthew appears before Circuit Court Judge Deidre Jefferson for sentencing. The courtroom is packed with Caitlin's family, friends, and supporters who have waited over 4 years for this moment. Judge Jefferson doesn't mince words. She acknowledges the calculated nature of the crime, the months of planning, the callous disregard for human life, and the attempt to manipulate the justice system with an elaborate staged scene. The sentence is swift and final. Life in prison without the possibility of parole for murder. And additional 5 years for ill treatment of animals. An additional 5 years for possession of a weapon during commission of a violent crime. The latter two sentences run concurrently with the life sentence. Assistant Solicitor Myers, in a statement after sentencing, sums it up perfectly. Speck earned his sentence after his brazen betrayal and premeditation. Under South Carolina law, Matthew will never be eligible for parole. He will spend the rest of his life in a correctional facility, denied the new life he thought he could build on the ashes of Caitlin's murder. And what of the house, the property Matthew valued more than his wife's life? Under South Carolina law, a person cannot profit from their own crimes. The Eagle Landing home was transferred to Caitlin's heirs, forever out of Matthew's reach. Caitlin Conrad Speck and Bailey May's story serves as a sobering reminder that the people we trust most can sometimes be the greatest threats, that domestic violence doesn't always look like what we expect, that calculated, premeditated murder can hide behind suburban normalcy. The Hanahan Police Department, forensic teams, and prosecutors prove that in the digital age. There are no perfect crimes. Every Google search leaves a trail. Every text message creates evidence. Every lie eventually collapses under the weight of forensic science. Rest in peace, Caitlin and Bailey May. Justice has been served. If you found this deep dive informative, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more true crime content. Drop a comment below letting me know what case you'd like me to cover next. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. I've included resources in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.